Check 1 2 1 2.
Oh, so I walk there with it.
Yeah. When you go up to
Okay. But play evening time loud. Okay. Share, please. Bring us some. Good evening. Hello. Evening time, one time. Hello, everybody. Get me. Good evening, everybody. Hello, everybody on the live stream in Jamaica and beyond. Welcome, everybody in Cayman. Everybody, Frank Hall. Good evening. Good evening. Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming to Pepper's to celebrate the life of our amazing father, Frank Hall. Thank you to Mario and Fiona for allowing us to have our session here. It's a place Dad used to love to come and party and play and just gather with friends. And thank you, Michael, for setting up everything for us. Michael Muirhead, thank you. I remember as a preteen coming to, can you all hear me properly? Okay. I remember as a preteen coming to Cayman to visit Dad. And the place was essentially a sandbar and nets around the houses. And gosh, how it's changed. And I just want to say, acknowledge that our father played a pretty good part in the development of Cayman. So, Perkins, you ready? So I'd like to welcome my older but little sister to give a brief history of our dad, Frank Hall.
Hi everyone, and thank you so much to our family and friends for coming out here today. We've come to celebrate the party of the legend, Frank Hall. Dad loved the party. He really enjoyed bringing people together and watching them have a good time, drinking chablis and eating curry goat. So this one is for you, Dad. Frank was born in Spanish Town on the 25th of March, 1934. He was the only child of Frank Hall Sr. and Marjorie Slyfield, where he grew up running around barefoot with the other kids on the farm that his father managed. His mother died when he was 9 years old of tuberculosis, and he and his friend Aubrey Messias used to dress in robes and pray with her in his room. We can only imagine what that did to Frank and what effect that had on his life. But he was rescued by his godfather, Leonard Carroll, who arranged for him to have further education and attend Jamaica College. So that was like country come to town, and a period of flourishing started for Frank as his athletic prowess came to the fore. He would swim for JC at Bournemouth Baths downtown, and he participated in athletics. He famously beat Douglas Manley in the 100-yard dash. And he helped the trash champs and bring home the baton for Jamaica College in the inimitable team of Warmington, Hamilton, Europe, Ewart, and Hall in 1952. So that you remember that. Okay. This afforded Frank an athletic scholarship to Notre Dame. USA, where he studied engineering. During this time, he was part of a team representing Jamaica in the Olympics, but he was eliminated in the heats. But, you know, we still think it's a profound accomplishment that he went to the Olympics. He returned to Jamaica after Notre Dame and embarked on many startups and business deals, including the glass factory. And then in 1964, he began Prestige Homes with his partner, Hugh Hart, the start of a 60-year relationship. So Prestige Homes became Frank Hall Homes in 1970, and they provided thousands, over 3,000 affordable and middle-income homes for Jamaicans, and he's seen as one of Jamaicans' nation builders in this regard. His family life and social life were a mixed bag. He married Tiny Henriquez in 1960. Mom tells how dad water skiing at Morgan's Harbor would make women swoon. And he loved hanging out at John Canoe Lounge at the Sheraton after work. They had 2 daughters, two of us, but they split up in 1968. He later married Lanu Burrows, and they lived in Orange Grove, which was one of his developments in Kingston. Okay. Dad was a Shearer man. Now, Shearer was the Prime Minister of Jamaica in the 70s, and Dad was a real supporter of Shearer. But that cost him dearly when he was beaten up at the JLP headquarters in New Kingston. This was a real turning event for Dad. He and Lanu left Jamaica, and he forever suffered PTSD, which was undiagnosed after that. And Cayman was a lucky recipient of Daddy's mind and drive. He started to build offices and affordable homes here with all of you guys. Thank you so much for all the contractors, plumbers, everybody who has come out here today. The Caymanian government awarded Dad a Heroes Day honor for nation building in Cayman. Having visited him many times in his Frank Hall Homes office on St. Mary Street, that iconic board building on stilts on Mary Street, we saw he loved being part of this community. He loved hanging out with his clients, negotiating repairs and prices, conferring with Brother Roberts and all the other contractors who are here today. And everything had to pass through Alistair. Enough respect, Alistair. These years were great for him. He partied in Miami and living in his dream house and hosting his friends, checking in with Cayman and his developments. He traveled with his friends, especially the Pervettis, on cruises and adventure trips, and explored his passions, Lennox Lewis's fights with Blaze and Tam, and jazz clubs in London with me. His family gatherings increased after Tammy married Blaze and I married Jeremy, and he has 3 grandsons, Jordy, Frankie, and Baruch. We had many memorable meetups in Jamaica, Cayman, and Miami. He finally moved full-time to Cayman and started to show signs of dementia. Despite his feisty personality, he recognized his disability and he didn't fight it. It wasn't easy watching him decline over the years, and we have to give so much thanks to his carers in Cayman, especially Phyllis. Thanks, Phyllis. Enough respect. And Bimbo. Thanks to Bimbo as well. And to the Dream Team in Jamaica, where we moved him back during COVID. We're so grateful for the support from everyone who jumped in from time to time to visit him and make him smile. He really had a great life, and he did it his way. Rest good, Dad. May your memory always be for a blessing. Smile. Really.
Hey, Michael, how's the live stream going? All right, great. All right, thanks, Terry Kins. As you heard, Dad never really let go of his humble beginnings. He always wanted the best for the people he provided homes for. Though we did not grow up in the same household as our father, we were always so proud to drive through Hall Crescent, Hall Boulevard, and Hallard Drive. and to see the different projects he did in Kingston, Spanish Town, Montego Bay, Jamaica, as well as Cayman. Frank always sat at his desk, whether in Miami or Cayman, watching his game shows, while he scribbled his numbers and made his notes on his yellow manila legal pad, doing his calculations, making sure he had ample dollar signs. I often use a yellow manila legal pad as a link to my father, though not as quite as savvy with the calculations. No, Dad's savvy partner in development from the 1960s was Hugh Hart. That's a 60-year relationship in friendship and in business. Now, Uncle Hugh, we invited you to speak, but you're not feeling it. So what I'd like to do is just tell a story that I call Barbie Bailey. Barbie Bailey is Uncle Hugh's niece, and she was a great friend of Dad's. And she used to go to Bamboo with him for dinner, and she tells me a story of how one time they went to Bamboo, and he's surrounded by women as usual. And the women said to him, "But Mr. Hall or Frank, how come you and Mr. Hart are such good friends? You're so different." And Dad says, "What you mean we're different?" And they said, "Well, you know, Mr. Hart, he's so elegant, and he's so, like, you know, carrying his pipe and, you know, just so intellectual." And Dad says, "No, so we're the same. He's just a better actor." So, Uncle Hugh, if you'd like to say something in rebuttal, otherwise I'll continue. You want? Okay. The thing is, by the speaker, it might be a little problem.
All I'm going to say is this, that Frank was wonderful out amongst the developments on the field. Don't give him the paperwork. He didn't like that very much. So one day he came into the office, he said, "The Commissioner of Income Tax wants to see me." I said, "Well, I'll come along with you." No, he said, I'll just go and talk to him. But he said, "Lend me your file so I can read up on something." So I said, "Well, be careful and just give it back to me." So he went to the Commissioner of Income Tax. And then I phoned him, I said, "Everything went well?" He said, "Yeah, man, no problem." I said, "Can I get back my file?" He said, "Good God, I left it with the Commissioner." I said, "Frank, stay on the field. Go and look at the houses. Don't talk to me about this sort of thing again." So we had a wonderful relationship. You know, there are not many partners that you can have for 60 years. Never a bad word, never a quarrel. And we did, if I saw a piece of land and wanted to buy it, couldn't find Frank, he was with the girls. Bought the land and you forget about it. 3 months later I said, "You know, Frank, you owe me so much." "Oh yes, okay." He sent me the money. He said, "By the way, what for?" I said, "We bought some land." "Oh, good man." Right? And he did the same thing. So it was a very, very happy relationship. And up until his last weeks and months, when I did manage to get there, I was very, very proud that he immediately recognized me. And it cemented the friendship and relationship that we had. So it was a very, very happy time with Frank.
Uncle Hugh, thank you so much for your words. And as Dad would say, you're a gentleman and a scholar. So Dad was a fiercely private person. And there's so many things some of us know, and there's so many things that none of us know. We all know the saying, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Well, Peter, Peter Pavetti, please come up and tell us about the Miami years. Well, tell us what you can tell us about the Miami years.
I'm actually not going to tell you a lot about the Miami years. We have to do that if you want to come over later. We can discuss it. What I want to say is I'm one of the many who were lucky to be able to call Frank a best friend. I say that as I am one of the many because the closer I became with Frank, the more I became aware of the fact of how many friends Frank had. We were introduced to Frank by another of his best friends, Sally Marwinke, who I'm sure many of you know. In fact, the last time I spoke at a memorial or a funeral was at Sally's. From Frank came to Miami, we were always invited to his parties, but never by Frank. We were always invited by Sally Marwinke. As a married couple, Frank had a certain reputation, and we were happily married. Not being deterred, Sally brought Frank out to meet us at John Martin's. Some of you may know John Martin's in Miami. And we gathered there every Friday night. It was Jamaicans, it was others, and every Friday just lasted for a long time. And that began a long and lasting friendship with Frank. Joining us on Fridays, sometimes Saturdays. Later, it became every Friday at Smith & Walensky, every Sunday at Nikki Beach, and except for the Sundays at his house and his Sunday soirees, which I'm sure some of you went to as well, whatever it was all about jokes, good food, and good friends. We then found we had other things in common as well, including our annual trips to London. And it wasn't long before we were coordinating our trips together. And this led to arranging other trips, including a fabulous trip to Marbella. You have some of the pictures that you've seen up there. And that was with Michael Alberger, Sandra Alberger, David Giles, his wife Elaine, Victor Lowe, Joni Madelon, and others. And then later, we started cruising together. We went London to Nice. We went London to Hamburg. We went Venice to Nice. That was 2 weeks. We went Australia to Hong Kong. That was 30 days. We went Singapore to Miami. That was 45 days. And then we had Miami to Miami. But Frank canceled the Miami to Miami. I believe at that point in time, Frank was starting to manifest some of his symptoms. But again, it was always about jokes, food, friends, and a good time. I was lucky to be part of that. And rest in peace, Frank Hall. All right.
Well done. Thank you. Thanks, Peter. And thanks for coming from Miami, you and Heather. So Dad was frugal. He was an entrepreneur. He loved to party. He also loved a deal. Cheapest wine from Costco and plates from Carnival Cruise Lines. I see you laughing, Bee. That was his way to afford all the parties he had. So rooted in real estate, even when buying art from famed Jamaican artist Parbo Singh, he'd ask him, how much a square foot for your masterpiece? Alistair was Frank's trusted accountant and had shared many years working with Frank and with Hugh. Alistair, please come and share some memories with us.
Good evening, and thank you all for coming. We're here to celebrate the extraordinary life of Mr. Frank Hall, a life lived to the fullest with good friends and good times, enjoying great success in business and on the sporting stage. He touched the lives of many, and while our hearts are heavy, we also feel immense gratitude for the time we had with him. His success wasn't just measured in monetary terms. it was also measured in the opportunities he created for others. He built his business not on the backs of others, but by lifting them up. Many of us here today can attest to how he willingly helped others, often quietly, without fanfare, simply because it was the right thing to do. He took great pride in seeing those that worked for him grow and succeed. For me, knowing Frank was a privilege. I first met him in 1999 when I started working for Frank Hall Homes. I knew of him by reputation, a star athlete, a successful businessman, and stories of legendary parties in Miami. Meeting him, I realized there was so much more to Frank than these things. Above all, he was a humble man, a man that very seldom spoke of his achievements or about himself, a man of integrity, a man true to his word. If he said something, you could always count on it. A man with a sharp mind, a quick wit, a cheeky smile, and always a twinkle in his eye. Over the next 25 years, I would get to learn more about Frank Hall, the man, his achievements, his adventures, and a man I greatly admired and respected. One of my earliest memories of Frank was him showing me around the office buildings not long after I started working for him. We came across a large walk-in vault in the basement, and he asked me if I knew if he was getting rent for it. I made some inquiries but was unable to find out who was renting it. Frank told me, get a locksmith, open it up and figure it out. I did this, and entering this vault, it was full of boxes and old stuff, and we noticed a small safe sitting in the corner. I asked the locksmith if he could open this up, and with a few seconds he had it opened up. It was filled with all sorts of jewels and other valuables. I told the man, close it back, and on leaving the vault, I saw a name I recognized. I called these people and asked them if they rented the vault. They said they did, and I explained how we'd opened up the safe. They became particularly upset, and then they asked me if I'd seen a small safe in there and if I had opened it. I told them yes, and now they were very upset. Frank and I were called into a meeting with them a few days later. We walked into a tense boardroom, and the meeting started with him explaining to me how I should be locked up, and if this happened in the States or in Canada, I'd already be in jail. On hearing this, Frank stood up and told them, if anyone's going to jail, it's him, because I was following his instructions. And what's more, it'll be them going to jail, because everything in that safe is most likely stolen or the proceeds of crime. And then he said, what have you got to say to that? At which point, the meeting finished up, and that just showed to me Frank's loyalty to his staff, something that he displayed through all the years I worked for him. There are other stories, and on one occasion I asked him if he'd ever met the Queen. He said no, but he said he had been invited to meet her along with a Jamaican team he was representing at the time. I asked him why he never went to the function, and he replied to me that he'd arranged a date with a young lady and thought that would be more fun than meeting the Queen. That was Frank, down to earth and straightforward. Frank attended Jamaica College and then went to university in America before returning to Jamaica. On his return to Jamaica, he saw the need for affordable housing and signed a contract to purchase some land, which he subdivided and had plans drawn up for the homes he intended to sell. He advertised the homes and with days had them all sold. He now needed to find the money to build the homes. So he made an appointment with a bank manager to apply for a loan. Frank told me how after 30 minutes of listening to the bank manager telling him why the bank couldn't lend a young man this amount of money, he'd had enough and he got up to leave. The bank manager asked him where he was going, to which Frank replied he'd heard enough and was leaving because he didn't think they were going to give him the money. The bank manager asked him to sit down and asked him how much money Frank had to put into the deal. Frank reached into his pocket, pulled out whatever money he had in his pocket and said this much. The bank manager then asked him if he would repay the loan, to which Frank replied yes. The manager said, all right, I'll take a chance and I'll give you the money you need. This was how Frank got his start in the housing business. I also traveled to Jamaica with Frank when he returned for the first time after many years of being away. It was not long after we landed, word was out that Frank was back in Jamaica, and old friends started reaching out to catch up with Frank. A dinner was arranged that evening, and a number of his good friends attended. It was an evening filled with laughter and friends reminiscing over events and friendships from the past 50 years. My memory from that evening was just how strong those friendships were, many being formed from his schoolboy days. Frank was considered a good friend by many. In his youth, Frank was a star athlete and was the first person to break 10 seconds for the 100 yards. He also held Jamaican swimming records, and he believes that one of those records still stands today. He explained that the reason being they don't swim that race anymore. He was very reluctant to talk about his own achievements, but he was immensely proud to be Jamaican and of Jamaicans' track and field legacy. Whenever the Olympics or other major events were taking place, everything in the office would stop as we watched the Jamaican sprinters compete. Many people worked for Frank during his time in Cayman, and he appreciated and cared for every one of them. Many of them having worked with him or for him for more than 20 years. He also built business relationships that continued for many years. His relationship with Hugh Hart and Heber Arch stretched over many years and continue to this day. Many deals with those gentlemen were sealed with a handshake. Phyllis was also with Frank from his early days in Cayman, taking care of his home, and in his last years in Cayman, Frank was never more relaxed and comfortable when Phyllis was by his side. Frank's final years were in Jamaica, and he was cared for by Andrea and Diane, both of whom cared for him with the same love and kindness as Phyllis. And on visiting Frank in Jamaica, you could see how comfortable he was with them. While our hearts are heavy with grief, let's also remember the joy he brought into our lives, the lessons he taught us, and the incredible legacy he leaves behind. He may be gone, but the impact he had on each of us will resonate for a lifetime. Rest in peace, Frank.
Thank you, Alistair. That was amazing. Really appreciate all your words. So I was going to say this towards the end, but I'm going to say it right now because I guess the second refill of Tia Maria is coming to me. Dad was a Tia Maria man. So, take your cups home with you and have a little refill of Tia Maria on Frank. All right, so to continue, Frank bounced back and forth from Miami and eventually settled in Cayman. Phyllis looked after Dad as he aged and his mental and physical health began to deteriorate. Thank you, Phyllis. Where are you? Thank you, Phyllis, for coming. And we understand when you told us that it would be too emotional for you to speak. Now we'd like to open the floor to anyone who would like to share a memory of Frank with us. Who's first?
Tammy, you mentioned how frugal your father was.
Wait, turn the camera so that these guys.
Oh.
Turn the live stream mic on.
No, you mentioned how frugal your father was, and ever since my father thought that he was being kind and loaned him that Firebird that was in the Harder They Come, that Jimmy Cliff rode across the golf course in New Kingston. But every opportunity that Frank got, he said, Perry never paid me for the use of that car in that movie. You need to get that money from him. I lived here in Cayman at the time, and your father used to visit Mary and Nathan, Auntie Mary, across the courtyard in Foster Village. I lived in number 8, and he was directly across, and he had this rusted out old Camaro, a cream color Camaro. And as I got my driver's license, he literally threw me the keys, and he said, "Look here, son, you can use it when I'm not here, but when I'm here, I need it back." And, you know, my memories of him back then was incredible. And you just had the most incredible father, and I'm so glad that I got to share a piece of him. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. I also want to acknowledge Sally Hensel, who would come and visit Dad a lot in these last 3 years that he was in Jamaica with us.
Well, I have to say a few words for Frank, you know.
Wait a second until the thing turns.
Oh, I need a camera.
Yes, because your mother is watching.
My mother. This is for my mother. All right.
It's turning, yeah. It's turning. Say hi,
Okay.
Mom.
Hi, Sheila. This is just for you. It's great to be in Cayman, to see so many incredible people and family. Auntie Jen, your family. I can't even list. There's so many people here. The Jamaicans that hide out come to Cayman. But Frank was incredible. We really got to know him in Miami first at Star Island, where he had the most incredible home and through the most incredible parties there, legendary. But I land in Cayman this afternoon, I get in a taxi, and there's a big guy in the taxi, and he's speaking Caymanian. But, you know, I said, "Yeah, we're from Jamaica." He goes, "Oh, I'm Jamaican, but I've been here for 50 years. I said, "Well, we're here to, you know, say goodbye to a great Jamaican, Frank Hall." He goes, "Frank died?" He said, "Last time I spoke to Frank, he said he was giving up building homes because, you know, he had kind of done it. But I can't believe he died. I mean, this is just random." Frank, as you'll know, came to Jamaica for his last few years and lived at Silver Sands with Tammy and Terry, taking wonderful care of Frank and Blaze and a team. And Frank would get wheeled, you know, he lived in a villa about a couple of 100 yards from Blaze and Tammy's home on the beach. And he would come down and have lunches whenever we were there. And it just amazed me. Here's this guy, he's 85, 87, whatever it was. He is obviously gone through several years of decline. He doesn't quite know what's happening. He's got skin issues all over his body. He's in a wheelchair. He's not walking, obviously, for years before he came to Jamaica. But he had a twinkle in his eye. And that never left Frank. And it was incredible. Most people that had reached that stage of life, you would see it. You didn't see it in Frank. And you would engage with him, and you weren't quite sure if he knew who you were, but I thought he knew who I was, and especially Candace, because he loved girls. They got him going. But it was incredible. His eyes were so blue and so bright, and he had a lot of life left right in those eyes. So he's gone now, but always remembered. Tammy.
All right. Anybody else want? Come, B. So here comes Belinda. Oh, she's prepared something wonderful. Belinda is Lanu's daughter, and Lanu was Dad's second wife.
Thank you. Well, I prepared something, but maybe I'm not going to read it. Well, I just wanted to say I am Lanu's daughter, Frank's second wife. They met and married in Jamaica in probably the early 70s, and with the incident that happened in Jamaica, fled, went to Miami, and then eventually came here. I have to say that for my mom, Frank was the love of his life. It wasn't my dad. It was Frank. And even though, the marriage didn't last, once she got over the heartbreak, they actually remained very good friends till the very end. Mom always said it was hard to remain angry with Frank. He just had this easy sense of humor, and he was always a gentleman. My own early childhood memories of Frank were brief, as he wasn't always around when we spent, school holidays with him. He was a workaholic, Mum said. That was before I knew what the word workaholic meant. But I have fond memories of watching him gracefully water ski in the Blue Lagoon, or the Blue Hole in Jamaica. And he loved backgammon, so he'd play backgammon in Blue Lagoon, in Miami, on his prized marble special backgammon table, and even on the beach here on 7 Mile Beach. It wasn't until I was older and I really got to know him a little better that I really appreciated this easy sense of humor and the gentleman that he was. In Miami, he was known for his big open house parties where everybody was welcome, and half the time he didn't know most of the people there, as we heard before. When he was done, he would quietly go up to bed and leave the party raging on without him. In Cayman, he became a regular at favorite restaurants, usually the ones within walking distance to his Colonial Club unit. He certainly knew how to enjoy life and was definitely a work hard, play hard kind of guy. Frank always showed us kindness and generosity. When we took Frank out for dinner, he always insisted on paying and refused to let us. It became a challenge with my husband, Mike. He even arm wrestled Frank for the bill on one occasion. And on another occasion, he snuck into the back of the restaurant in the kitchen and tried to pay the bill, and somehow Frank always won out. So those dinners with Frank were always a delight, full of stories and humor, and it was fun watching him flirt with all the cute little waitresses that came by. We're also hugely grateful for Frank for introducing us to Tony Connolly, who became our first Cayman partner when we started our own company, Corporate Electric, 25 years ago. So we're very blessed for that. Frank, as you know, had the reputation as a shrewd businessman and could quickly calculate the numbers on a complicated development before you could even whip out your trusty calculator. Quietly known for his numerous office buildings in Georgetown, but more famously known for his low-income housing, Frank Hall Homes filled a desperate need for Caymanians even back then. Always one to keep the numbers down, he was successfully able to provide affordable housing to the local community that no one else has done, that I know of, ever in Cayman. I am proud to have called Frank my ex-stepfather and referred to Tammy and Terry as my sisters from another mister. So, God bless your soul and rest in peace, Frank.
Michael, come now. For 2 minutes.
Well, thank everyone for coming. Frankie and I were very close friends, and he, as everyone has said, was an amazing person. He worked really hard. He didn't like documentary details, but he got everything done in an amazing manner. And he provided houses for people in Jamaica and houses for people in Cayman, which may not have otherwise been able to afford them. He went to the government and was able to get the lot size that was unavailable before, so that the government agreed that for the kind of housing that he was building, they could have a smaller lot, and lot sizes were agreed. Frankie went to the banks and arranged special loans for the people, and amazing houses were built, and people bought them, and Frank was very proud of that. He had numerous friends. We used to party with him in Miami before he came here, and he had a faithful chauffeur called Alvin who drove us around in a limousine. Me, Pete, and J.R. Wong, and we had a wonderful time. Problem is the chauffeur had no limo license, so he couldn't park anywhere. So he had to drop us off and drive around to various spots, and we called him back to pick us up. I remember Frank's parties at his house. Just as his daughter said, numerous people appeared, and Frankie used to go to send the helper to the supermarket and buy 5-gallon bottles of wine, red and white. So I said, Frankie, you don't think we should get some better wine? He said, no, after 2 or 3 drinks, they won't know what they're drinking. And the parties were some of the best parties everyone went to. The stories told of Frank, he told me the story that in his later years of life, he had bought a much bigger boat. And the captain told him, look, Frankie, we need X amount of money to buy fuel. So Frankie gave him half the fuel, half the money. So him and Ernie and other friends flew to Paris to wait for the boat. They got a call saying the boat had broken down in the Atlantic, had been rescued and towed back to England, and Frankie had to pay the cost of rescuing the boat and getting it back. Frankie said it was the worst experience in his life, and he'll never own another boat. So, and he wasn't perturbed at all. They were all waiting somewhere in the south of France for the boat. It never arrived. Frank was a great person. You know, he was never in a bad mood, always joyous, always trying to help someone, always looking for a party. And as Pete said, we used to go out with him regularly in Miami, and he had a wonderful time. In Cayman, everyone loved him. Mr. Connolly and Alistair helped him run the businesses, and all the contractors and Jamaicans and Caymanians who worked for him loved Frank to death. The people who made the most money out of Frank's houses are those who bought them. They have doubled, tripled, 10 times what they were when Frank sold them to them. So Frank never made a fortune out of that, but I can tell you those that bought Frank's houses have made a lot and a lot of money. He's been looked after by his family in Jamaica and by Phyllis and others in Cayman before. And I can't tell you how much Ernie Smart, myself, Hugh, and others miss Frankie. There's no one like him in the world, and we'll never have another friend like him. Thank you all for coming.
Where's Mr. Connolly? Anybody else want to speak? Come now. Come. Alistair covered you? Okay. All right. Okay. Okay, so we brought Dad to be with us in Jamaica in 2022 and took care of him along with our wonderful care team, Camilla, Andrea, Diane, Linton, and Garfield. And thanks so much to Dr. Bartley, who lived only 2 houses down from us and always made himself available to help when needed. Okay. This morning we went to the Garden of Reflections and laid Dad to rest. So anyone who wants to go visit him there and say a few words, he's there. But the truth is, he's floating here with us tonight. We consider it a blessing to have had Dad with us for those last 3 years. And as I said to you before, his favorite drink was Tia Maria. And from a line from Casablanca, which he'd always quote to us was, "Here's looking at you, kid." Frank is now free of the bondage of his body and can now fly to the moon and is dancing among the stars. Let's mingle until 8 tonight and have a nice time. Michael, play the Fly the Moon. Thank you for everybody for coming. Really appreciate those who flew in and those who came. Appreciate. Blessings.
Fly me to the moon, let me play among the stars. Let me see what spring's like on Jupiter and Mars. In other words, hold my hand. In other words,
He's looking down and you're smiling. That's why you're having it peppers. You're like, are you so no. We hardly thank you at the very beginning. Yes. No, I don't care about that. But I did. I don't care about that. That's got nothing to do with anything. But yes, I did. Go mingle with your friends. Yes. I'm going to return this. I am. I'll take it.
In other words,
I was going to pretend I was singing.